Sure. I believe that climate change is a real thing. I mean, you look at the hurricane that just took place in Mexico. It's one of the
Should
worst.
should the government protect us against climate change?
I think the government should at least investigate it. Sure.
Investigate, but not protect?
I wouldn't say that. I would say after the investigation, whatever they find out, I think if it looks like there is some kind of man-made effect on climate, I think we probably should do something about it. I think the government should be involved. Sure.
Well, what's your name, sir?
Art.
Art. So Art, Bernie Sanders thinks that climate change is the most important peril or danger facing America. Do you agree with him?
No, I think there's a spiritual problem that's probably a lot more damaging to America at this point. But I still think we ought to invest resources in finding out whether or not there's a man-made effect on the climate.
Right. So why did the environmentalists change the name from climate change? They used to call it global warming, and now they call it climate change. Are both those things the same?
Um, well, I think the bottom line is the main point is that the bigger question is whether or not man-made activities have any effect on the warming or the cooling of the planet. So that's something that I think we ought to at least spend some resources, some time investigating.
So the thesis was that the greenhouses gases were going to increase because of our carbon use, right?
Mhm.
So there would be an increase in carbon dioxide, and then the Earth would get warmer, and then the sea levels would rise because the ice caps would melt. Is that the basic thesis
Well, I think
of
that,
global warming?
sure, I think that's one theory, but
What's the other theory?
well, I think there's a lot to investigate. We just don't. I don't think we know enough to say whether or not humans being on the Earth and any activities that we would undertake have any effect on the climate. But I think it's certainly worth investigating.
So should we pass legislation before we investigate?
Well, I don't know exactly where we are in terms of, I'm not on the front end of the investigation, so I don't know. But I would guess that those who are doing the investigation, based on their results, we should probably do something.
But you say that we should have an investigation now to find out what the effects are by human action. But until we have a report or a conclusion that's determinative, it would be disingenuous or foolish to pass legislation without even knowing if there is some real thing going on there that is a peril, a danger to humanity.
Well, again, I would say based on the findings, and I don't know that I know all that the scientists know, but I think based on findings, if it's found that to any great degree that we are affecting the climate, I think sure there should be legislation that would at least try to maybe limit greenhouse gases or whatever it is that might be affecting the climate.
Which is the greenhouse gas that is causing the global warming, because it doesn't call global cooling?
Well, I know that one particular element is methane gas that is being released on by activities on farms.
By the cows.
Sure, that's
You want to get rid of the cows?
well, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't suggest that. But again, I don't know to what degree that is, but that is one item that's being investigated.
Well, the Environmental Agency has called carbon dioxide a pollutant. So they've already legislating before the investigation. So you think carbon dioxide is the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a problem?
Well, not being a scientist, I don't know, but I think it's certainly worth investigating. I mean,
which is the greenhouse gas that is having the greatest warming effect, the greatest greenhouse effect?
Again, not being a scientist, I don't know specifically, but I did mention methane and then of course carbon dioxide. Um,
Would you think? What about water vapor?
what about it?
Well, that's a greenhouse gas, uh, and in fact, you know how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere? What percentage?
I don't know specifically. No,
You have a ballpark figure? You think it could be 20% or 10% or
I really don't know.
5%?
Who knows?
What about 1%?
It could be 1%. It could be 20. I don't know.
Well, would it surprise you that it's 1/25th of 1%?
No.
And I'm just you know how much water vapor there is? 2%. So the real greenhouse gas that's having any effect, if there is a greenhouse gas effect, the one that's doing it is water vapor, not carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide is just a trace gas, and it's not even a tenth of 1%. It's a 25th of 1%.
Okay. Well,
So that's in my view, a lot of legislation, a lot of cost for nothing, because first, as you said, we don't have a definitive report, and if we did have one, the gas that we had to attack is water vapor, not carbon dioxide. So why did the EPA declare carbon dioxide a pollutant when it's not doing any harm to anyone?
well, again, not being a scientist, I don't know. I don't have all of the facts. Um, I think at this point,
But before we have the facts, we shouldn't pass legislation, right? And we already have in the form of regulation by the EPA.
I don't think it hurts to limit the amount of pollutants that we're releasing into the air. I mean, I
Does
think if
carbon
we,
dioxide affect your health? I mean, if you're breathing carbon dioxide right now, is it
well,
harming
certainly,
you?
I think um, I think when you go over the limit of anything, I mean, you could have too much water and that could hurt you. So, we do live on a fragile planet. We live in a fragile environment, and I think there are elements that we as humans could introduce into the atmosphere. There are things that we could do that could um,
It's
that could certainly make
possible.
it more difficult for us to
Yeah, it's possible,
continue.
but before there's any evidence for it, shouldn't we uh, hold back on regulations and legislation? Don't you have to have the facts before you legislate and regulate?
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I
You
appreciate
agree
that. Again,
or not?
I don't know what the answers are because I am not a scientist, so I don't know what the latest is. Although one thing I do have to say is this should not be a partisan thing. Um, this is uh, we all live on this planet, and we all need to do things to take care of it and make sure that we all can continue to exist on it. So if we do find out that um, there is some harmful effect of the overproduction of carbon dioxide, we certainly do owe it to humanity to do something um, to limit that so that we can all continue to exist here.
Yeah, if we found that out, but we haven't. The government has not done a report that conclusively proves that this is the case, but already they've passed regulation and they're considering laws. Like in Europe, they passed Kyoto, in a few other countries.
Sure.
And guess what? Our carbon dioxide percentage has gone down more than theirs since they passed Kyoto. Is that surprising to you? Do you know why?
I don't know. Again,
Well,
not being a scientist,
Yeah.
I don't know what the final. And certainly,
Well-
there are people on both sides of the issue. I think we owe it to ourselves to get to the bottom of it and stop debating, find out what the actual answer is, and do something to protect the planet.
But we need to have the facts, conclusive facts, before we legislate, because the legislation has costs. And so you impose cost on business and on other activities. It only makes sense if you can prove that an increase in carbon dioxide is a threat to humanity, right?
That would seem to make sense. Again, I'm not a scientist, so I don't I don't have all the
Okay, Art.
answers.
Thank you for sharing your views with us,
Sure.
and I hope you have a great Sunday morning.
Oh, thank you. I like your tie.
Oh, thanks. So does my wife.